الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Last week we started the Fiqh of Tahara classes. We started 2 weeks ago. The first week was introduction. Last week we started on the things that break the wudu, and we mentioned a number of things. So just as a quick revision, who can remember some things that we discussed last week? As a general principle, whatever exits from the private parts, be it urine, feces, wind, whether it is mani, wadi or mazi. And it also includes unusual things like if someone passed worms or stones. We'll come back to further details on the rulings on mani when we discuss what breaks the ghusl. Further on, we discussed that in the Hanafi and Hanbali madhab, that if blood flows, then that breaks the wudu as well, and includes things like pus and serum or serous fluid that also breaks the wudu. Then we discussed that in the Shafi'i madhab, the touching of the opposite gender, be it your wife or a non-mahram woman, breaks the wudu. In which madhab? Shafi'i. Just checking if you're listening. Okay. And then the similarity to the Shafi'i madhab is the Maliki and Hanbali madhab, which define the same ruling, but the touching must be with shahwat, with desire. And in the Hanafi madhab, the wudu does not break or by the touching. Okay? Then we mentioned, the last thing we mentioned, and we stopped at this point, was touching the person's own private parts breaks the wudu in the Hanbali madhab, Maliki madhab, and the Shafi'i madhab, but not the Hanafi madhab. Okay? And in all three, the touching is with this part of the hands. Okay? We just call the palms of the hands, with this part, or the insides of the fingers. So if it is the fingertips or the back of the hand or any other part of the body, then that will not break the wudu. That's something I didn't mention last week. In addition, the Shafi'i madhab also includes that if a person touches the private part of someone else, that will also break the wudu. Now you might ask, well, how is that going to happen? If, for example, you have a child and like my child does, she screams out, "Potty hai," and she tells the whole world that potty has been done, and you have to go and wash her, then immediately, obviously, in washing her, you will have to touch her private part in the rear end. So that will result in the breaking of the wudu only in the Shafi'i madhab. That's not the case in the other madhahib. Okay? Here also to understand, it doesn't matter if the touching of the private part is accidental or intentional. It breaks the wudu in those three madhahib. Okay? Now, we didn't have a lot of time for questions. If someone has any questions on this section, one brother asked me last week and he wanted to clarify. The mani has the rulings of ghusl, and the mani is what? What is it physically? Semen, sperm, right? The mazi and the wadi have the rulings of what? Is it ghusl or wudu? Wudu. Okay? So if mazi comes out, which is the arousal fluid, so someone gets aroused, then fluid comes out, that is called mazi, that breaks the wudu. And if wadi comes out, what is wadi? Sorry? No. Wadi is the fluid that comes out either before urine or after urine. And the coming out of wadi breaks the wudu. One thing to remember is that coming out of wadi or mazi may result even without you knowing it. Okay? So someone goes to the toilet after he prays and he finds that there is wadi on his underwear, for example, then he must assume that that happened either before or while he was praying, so he has to pray again. And that's where we will come, inshallah, into details around when you do tahara of the clothing, what is involved there. We'll discuss that in detail. Any questions on this section before we move on to new items? I know there were some people I couldn't answer their questions last week. Everyone is happy? Okay. Let's complete some of the things that break the wudu in the Hanafi madhab. We mentioned in the Hanafi madhab it was bleeding, pus, and serum coming out. In addition, if someone vomits, and the amount of vomiting is a mouthful or more, so it fills your mouth, that would be considered one mouthful. And the fuqaha describe it is that a mouthful is an amount that is difficult to stop. Okay? Less than a mouthful, you can stop it and swallow it back in again. But more than a mouthful, there's no way you can hold it and bring it back inside again. So if a person vomits, regardless of whether that is intentional or unintentional, that breaks the wudu in the Hanafi madhab and also in the Hanbali madhab as well. Okay? So the Hanabila and the Hanafiya have commonality in blood, pus, and in vomiting. Additionally, if a person laughs out loudly during the prayer, that breaks the wudu according to the Hanafis. How much is loud? So I was praying and the person behind me was reciting the Fatiha loud enough that I could hear him. Okay? So that disturbs the Imam. You shouldn't do that. Similarly, so if someone laughs loudly enough that the person next to them can hear them, that will be considered loud enough to break the wudu in the Hanafi madhab. Let's now discuss sleeping, because sleeping is the one that is harder to remember. We'll do the easiest madhab, which is the Hanbali madhab, is any amount of sleep or any depth of sleep or any position will break the wudu. No matter what kind of sleep it is, it will break the wudu. Maliki is if the sleep is heavy or the sleep is light and for a long duration, that will break the wudu. Okay? Then in the Shafi'i madhab and the Hanafi madhab, they are both the same. If a person is sleeping like this, okay, where his buttocks are on the floor firmly, okay, and he has gone to sleep like this, right, the wudu does not break. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that when the person sleeps, the anal sphincter relaxes. So he does not know if he has passed any air or not. But when you are in this position, number one, your sleep is not too deep, and number two, no air can come out. Okay? And because in the Hanafi and Shafi'i madhab, it is not sleep that breaks the wudu, but it is the passing of the air that breaks the wudu. So in their position is that it doesn't matter if you slept very heavy in this position and you slept for 14 hours, it doesn't matter. The wudu is not broken. I was praying Fajr here a few days ago, and after Fajr, I was doing my adhkar, and one person, he was sitting down like this, and he was just sitting in the middle, not even no pillar, no behind him, and then mashallah, he started snoring so loudly that the whole masjid could hear him. So, you know, it's quite possible to sleep in this position. Similarly, the Sahaba Kiram, they would be sitting in the masjid after Maghrib, before Isha, and they would fall asleep waiting for the Prophet ﷺ. But sometimes the Prophet ﷺ would come as Isha just entered, and sometimes he would come delayed. And so they were like, you know, the tradies, they wake up at 4 o'clock, right? And then they go to sleep very early as well. So the Sahaba were a similar sleep pattern. They would wake up early and sleep early. So by the time Isha came, it's dark outside, they're all sleeping. And when the Prophet ﷺ used to enter, they did not used to go and repeat their wudu. So the Shafi'i and the Hanafi madhab take their evidence from this, according to the actions of the Sahaba, that if they were seated and sleeping like this, then the wudu would not break according to them. Okay, that completes all of the things that break the wudu. Next week, inshallah, we'll do the things that need ghusl, and we'll do those. Any questions about the things that break the wudu?